Joining me now is Bill Jasper, William Jasper, or Bill, as some of us call him. Mr. Jasper is with The New American. He's also the author of several books, a couple of them on the United Nations. And today, President Trump at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office was back at it, signing executive orders. Here's one of them I want to talk to Bill about. Watch this.
In light of numerous actions taken by a number of bodies of the United Nations, which exhibited deep anti-American bias, we have an executive order prepared for your attention that would withdraw the United States from the UN Human Rights Council, would withdraw the United States from the UNRWA, which is a refugee organization, and would also review American involvement in UNESCO, which has also exhibited anti-American bias. More generally, the executive order calls for a review of American involvement and funding in the UN in light of the wild disparities in levels of funding among different countries that, as you've expressed previously, is deeply unfair to the United States.
So I've always felt that the UN has tremendous potential. It's not living up to that potential right now. It really isn't. It hasn't for a long time. It has. There are great hopes for it, but it's not being well run, to be honest. And they're not doing the job. A lot of these conflicts that we're working on should be settled, or at least we should have some help in settling them. We never seem to get help. That should be the primary purpose of the UN, the United Nations, and. Again, it's got great potential, and based on the potential, we'll continue to go along with it, but we got to get their act together.
All right, joining me now is Bill Jasper. I think the president being a little more complimentary than I would be. I don't think it is has great potential. I think it was actually established for the destruction of America and national sovereignty. But I sure appreciate his getting America out of the UN Human Rights Council. UNRWA, that's that group in the UN that was over in Gaza. And we have looked at their curriculum, as you know, Bill, I'm sure you have as well, that was all about teaching those children in that school in Gaza to go after the Jews, to take down the Jews, to eliminate the Jews. We see that, according to numerous reports, some of their students ended up being some of the terrorists. We saw the social media of some of their staff celebrating the attack on October 7th. We then found out there was armaments under that building of UNRWA, and we are told by press that some of the hostages may have been under that building. So we're glad to be out of UNRWA. And then United Nations Education, Scientific, Cultural Organization. I think the first executive director of UNESCO was Huxley, who in 1948 called for, the merging of capitalism, Christianity, communism, all of this merging together through a great Hegelian dialectic, and then went on to call for preparing the field for active euthanasia so that what is not thinkable today will become a reality later. That's UNESCO. 3 UN organizations, very evil. What say you tonight, Bill?
Absolutely. I agree completely. It was music to my ears to hear that they were going to lose their funding and that we would withdraw from them. However, as you pointed out, President Trump was being way overgenerous in talking about the United Nations itself as having great potential, tremendous potential, he said, fantastic potential, he said. This year is the 80th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. We have an 80-year history of this global assembly, a dictators club, a mass murderers club, kleptocrats club, the worst regimes in history. And all of them are members of this global body. And the UN Council on Human Rights includes, there are 47 members. It's rotating of the 193 members every year, 47 move in. So this year, as in many years in the past, Communist China, Communist Cuba, Communist Vietnam, and many of the quote-unquote former communist countries that still operate as communist kleptocrat dictatorships are still on the council. And many others as well, Islamic states and African states that are notorious for human rights abuses by all of the different measurements and metrics that one might want to use. So it is Orwellian and unconscionable beyond belief that we would give a camouflage of even any kind of serious consideration to this UN Council on Human Rights when it regularly includes members and the presidency. You know, it's a rotating presidency every year, and we've had some of the worst violators in there, and they use this as a podium to attack the West and to attack the United States in particular, to attack Israel, of course. But the thing is, you recall, when President Trump came in 2017, he took us out of that. He took us out of UNESCO. And what happened? Biden put us right back in. So this isn't a permanent solution. The permanent solution is to get the United States out of the United Nations, to cut off our funding, and to get them out of the United States. My two books on the United Nations Exposed and Global Tyranny Step by Step, the United Nations and the Emerging New World Order, and the hundreds of articles that I've written over the last 40 years on this subject, have looked in depth at all of the aspects of the United Nations. I was our correspondent at the United Nations for over 30 years. And let me tell you, it is chock full of anti-American, pro-communist, pro-socialist organizations, all of the NGOs. There's nearly 7,000 NGOs that have been given consultative status at the United Nations. That means they get to participate in a full way in all of the deliberations of the United Nations. So you have all of those promoting abortion, like Planned Parenthood and all their various globalist pro-abort allies, all of the LGBTQ, LMNOP, perversions that are pushing the United Nations to be ever more militant, and it has become ever more militant in promoting all of the perversions, sexual perversions all over the world, and particularly using our money, which we are giving them, to foist this on the third world countries. So any way you look at it, the United Nations has been an abysmal failure from the standpoint of bringing about peace, fraternity, brotherhood, etc. It has been a great success in terms of promoting socialism, communism, Marxist Leninism, and perversion all over the world.
Mm-hmm. And of course, their blue-helmeted soldiers are notorious for raping and sexually molesting children, raping women, or exchanging sex for food in areas where they're supposed to go to help people. Hundreds of examples which we have reported on, and it's even been reported in some of the mainstream press. Or whenever this happens, they let it die down. It's not only the UN peacekeepers, but we have had notorious examples of UN officials and UN agencies within the UN running child sex trafficking, child pornography, and all of these go down the memory hole. But isn't that what the UN's been doing?
Covers them up.
Isn't that what the UN's been doing with the reporting we've gotten from Todd Bensman, from Michael Yon, that they've been reporting down there in the Darien Gap, or in Panama, or back here in the U.S., that down in Mexico, all of these guys and gals getting these UN cards. They're stopping we got the pictures of the way stations along the way through the Darien Gap, funded by the Department of Homeland Security under Biden and the United Nations. And yet we have the largest sex trafficking of children in the U.S. with the help of the federal government, and apparently the UN is in on it. So when you tell me the UN has been known for being involved in sex trafficking, well, that's consistent with what we've been told by the human trafficking coming through the UN with the help of the Biden government from Michael Yon and Todd Bensman.
Yep. So the Organization on International Migration, the OIM, is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, as is the UN Human Rights Council, as are a couple dozen other UN agencies. Outside of New York, Geneva, Switzerland is the main headquarters of all these various UN organizations. I've been there, I've been to them. They have these huge palatial palaces there gleaming buildings and thousands of pampered public servants, they call them. They live a luxurious lifestyle, and they claim to be working for the downtrodden and the poor of the earth. But as you just mentioned, the OIM, which is run now by an American globalist that was in the Biden and the Obama administrations, Amy Pope, she's now head of the OIM, and she was coordinating with the OIM in Geneva, with all the UNESCO and UN High Commission for Refugees in Mexico and throughout Latin America, and with our Health and Human Services and State Department here in the United States to make sure that this migration invasion would be able to come in and transform the United States. And so in the process of doing that, they lost, quote unquote, hundreds of thousands of children. So where are these children now? How many of them have been sexually molested? How many of them are engaged in slave labor here? How many of them are in child pornography? We do know from the testimony of Tara Lee Rhoda and others that were working in that many of these children were actually being given to MS-13 and other gangs, people who were known to be child traffickers. So
yeah, that's right.
What the United Nations, that's what the United Nations is really doing under the cover of global peace and helping the poor.
Yep, and that's what Tara's been here many times telling us, so I agree 100%. Look what I just found. A very young Bill Jasper, back in 2002, speaking at an event being carried by C-SPAN, April 2002, on the United Nations, the growing threat of the United Nations. If you put his name into a search engine along with United Nations, you'll see a lot of his work in his books. What are some famous quotes, maybe a quote or two, as to the founders of the UN, as to their goals and objectives that would show that their ultimate goal is the elimination of national sovereignty of nations?
Well, we have right from the very beginning when the UN Charter, which is always held up with great veneration, that this is this great document. It's almost like it's sacred scripture to the globalists. We know that the people who were most involved in putting that together were Alger Hiss, the Soviet agent, who was an advisor to Franklin Delano Roosevelt and to President Truman following that. So we had a convicted Soviet agent, Alger Hiss, and then we had Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov, who put this together. So you had two communists putting together the Charter of the United Nations, and their whole purpose in doing so was to destroy national sovereignty, to eventually keep building the United Nations to the point where it would have more legislative, executive, and judicial power on a global level. And so that now we have this past fall, this past September, in New York City at the UN headquarters, we had the UN Summit on the Future. And I'm sure you know our correspondent, Alex Newman. Yep. He and one of our other correspondents were there at the Summit of the Future. And it's calling for, the Summit for the Future is calling for the global currency, the CBDC, cryptocurrency that will give a control over all our economic activity globally, calling for control of all of the internet and for national digital IDs. So this is what the UN has been doing from the very beginning, is building the superstructure, the legislative, executive, judicial, and of course, military and police powers to be gradually but increasingly given over to the United Nations.
Do you think we'll go to a North American Union before we go, regions? Or do you think we'll go just straight to global government? That's
something that we have been fighting against, going clear back to the first battle on NAFTA. We pointed out that was the purpose of NAFTA. And The USMCA that President Trump negotiated, or rather he had members of his administration, they were holdovers from the Obama administration. He went along with that. We were opposed to him on this because this melding together in trade with Mexico, the United States, and Canada is really the same path and the same architects, the same people, same globalists, the Council on Foreign Relations, who were pushing for and created the European Union. And this is what is known as harmonizing our trade policies and all of our economic and social and political policies so that we can be merged together into a regional government. And so this whole North American Union movement, which has been underway for over 50 years, is really a way to subvert our national sovereignty. And President Trump has said he's all for Make America Great Again, America First, and American sovereignty, that we believe in our sovereign independence, not globalism. But if we move in that direction more toward unifying with Mexico and Canada, then we're already down that road, that regional path, which Zbigniew Brzezinski under Carter and Henry Kissinger and others have called for regional steps, creating regional blocks like at the European Union, where they've already given up virtually all of their national sovereignty, and they're being ruled more and more by unelected bureaucrats from Brussels, from the European Union. Once we get different European, or rather regional groups established, then they can all be merged into a global world government.
Yep, and I think that's where we're headed. You know, the Bible talks about the world divided into 10 regions, Revelation 17 as well, and then Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7. I think we're headed that direction. And the European Union Commission, the United Nations, Club of Rome, they've all had their maps for dividing the world into 10 regions, and the UN, as I said, being one of them. Here is your book, The United Nations Exposed, the Internationalist Conspiracy to Rule the World, and you can order it, and you'll see the different chapters there by my friend Bill Jasper, an expert on the United Nations. I'm sure you can order it at, thenewamerican.com or where?
It's available on Amazon, but also at jbs.org.
jbs.org. Okay, jbs.org. Okay, a couple more things here for you, Bill. President Trump signed an executive order, or I shouldn't say that yet. I don't know if he has, just talk of it. But he's doing things to get rid of the Department of Education. That is something that, you know, my second book in 1993 was on that, as well as my third book. My first little book was 1990 on the New Age movement. 93 was education. 95 was education. So this is kind of where I cut my teeth in writing and speaking, was on education, along with the New Age movement, which involved education because they were teaching New Age concepts in the schools. But cosmic humanism is another name for it. Jimmy Carter gave us the Department of Education. Reagan wanted to do away with it. Is Donald Trump going to be successful at this? I think he should. I wish he could. I don't see the Department of Education mentioned in the Constitution, but is he going to be successful at this?
Well, you're right. It's not in the Constitution. In fact, it is totally unconstitutional. The federal government has only those powers, those delegated powers given to it under the Constitution, and it has no role constitutionally, morally in education. So you're right. It was 1979, Jimmy Carter's last year in office, and you recall his vice president was Walter Mondale. Walter Mondale was all mobbed up with the National Education Association, and he had made a pledge to them that he was going to get a cabinet-level Department of Education. Why? Because we want to control the minds of our youth. We want to be able to indoctrinate them, as they do in every communist country, every totalitarian country. So, I mean, that's completely anathema to the whole American way of thinking. The education is supposed to be first that of the parents, and then you do it in the local community. So by strong-arming and with all the media, the establishment, fake news media on their side, they were able to get this barely pushed through Congress, creating this Department of Education. So the Republican Party, in the 1980 platform, had as a primary objective to get rid of, to abolish this new Department of Education, and Ronald Reagan ran on that. However, as we've seen today, all around us, we had too many rhinos in there, and this should have been a slam dunk because President Carter was not popular. This was a last-minute thing in his administration, and that would have been the time to kill this monstrosity, which has overtaken so much of our country and all of our schools. But the rhinos wimped out on it, squished out on it. The Republican establishment globalists made sure that this wasn't removed. And then the way that the Republican globalists worked is, okay, well, we'll try next time. And so it stayed in the Republican Party platform, but there was never anyone who really pushed it after that. And so this is quite amazing that President Trump has gone this far. He can't abolish it by himself. He is going to reportedly going to cut the funding, the federal funding or rather cut out the federal bureaucracy in Washington, devolve it to the states, and just give the states the money in block grants. We don't know exactly how that's going to come about. But a certain amount of political capital by the president should be expended on getting Congress to undo the damage they did in 1979. We've had 45 years now to see this debacle actually in process, and we should know by now that it's been disastrous. You recall the A Nation at Risk report that came out in 1984, and in that one, it surveyed and showed all of the different metrics of how we were going down in math and social studies and reading and literacy and all of the different areas. We were surpassed by all these third world countries, and we were spending more than anyone else. And the conclusion was that we have engaged in a self-destructive process. We have, if an enemy had done this, it would be considered an act of war, but we have done it to ourselves. Yep. And it was an act of war. But it was by people who are trying to destroy our country. It wasn't even good intentions. It was very clear that this was an ongoing attempt to dumb us down, bum us down, scum us down, slum us down, so that America would no longer be a preeminent world power.
Let me hit one more issue here with you, and that would be Ted Cruz. I think Ted Cruz is out tonight, if I can find it. Ted Cruz is out tonight talking about, here it is. Ted Cruz, according to this report here, is calling for the IRS to be abolished. There's been more and more talk of this. We're going to a flat tax. I think, we should abolish the IRS, fund it all with terrorists if we can. Trump has even hinted at it. There's been talk of a consumption tax, which of course would pick up the drug dealers and the prostitutes and everybody. But what do you make of this? Closing comment about this. You think we'll ever see the end of the IRS, particularly when we find out how much our money is being wasted by USAID?
Well, abolishing the IRS should go hand in hand with abolishing the income tax.
Amen.
Because the IRS administers the income tax, and the income tax was one of those planks of the Communist Manifesto that was put in the Wilson administration. So over 100 years ago, we've been under this, what Karl Marx called for in the Communist Manifesto, and which we were told would never go above 1 or 2%. That the average person, it was just going to be to soak the rich. The average person would never end up paying any income tax. And now it's not only the tax, but the invasion. We are forced to make a record of everything that we do, and we're forced to allow then government snoops to come in on our lives and investigate every part of our lives. So,
so it
should go.
And they're having protests. They had protests this afternoon in front of the Department of Treasury. They're upset with Doge. And I guess they had, we carried it, I think, on our breaking news channel. And they had a podium out there, something to the effect that you were not elected, Elon. And they're upset because they were trying to find out, where are you spending your money? What's going on here? Get access to things. Apparently, USAID, which is really, according to RFK Jr. and others, is nothing but a front for the CIA. I also have a chart here. I don't know if I still have it up, but I had a chart here that showed that a bunch of the BBC, I guess I've taken it down now, a bunch of the BBC was getting their funding from USAID to push the anti-Americanism all over the world. So apparently the money is being uncovered. Well, Doge wants to get in and find out what's going on at the Department of Treasury. And tonight, Pocahontas was out there screaming and hollering with a bunch of other liberals in a large crowd. Here we go.
No one elected Elon Musk to nothing. Not one Democrat in America voted for Elon Musk. Not one Republican in America voted for Elon Musk. Not one independent in America voted for Elon Musk. Not one libertarian in America voted for Elon Musk. Damn, not one vegetarian in America. And yet, Elon Musk is seizing the power that belongs to the American people. We are here to fight back.
Well, and that's Maxine Waters standing next to her. Apparently, they don't want us to know. They don't want transparency to know how they've been spending our money because we just found out with USAID just a little bit. Can you imagine when we find out about all the money missing from the Pentagon and the IRS and all these places that we're supposed to be funding and the IRS wants to audit you? But what would happen if you audited the Fed? What would happen if you audited the IRS? I bet you'd find trillions of dollars missing.
Well, this is what is desperately needed. And Elon Musk, it's true, he cannot abolish any of these agencies or whatnot. But he is given the authority to look into them, and then the president or the appropriate cabinet official can take the action. But here, look at this. We have thousands of NGOs at the United Nations and here all across our country who are funded with billions of dollars, much of it from our various agencies. You refer to USAID, they're funding things all over the world, including many of these agencies at the United Nations and these NGOs, these thousands of NGOs that are there. I've been there at these UN summits, and these NGOs are, ever since 1992 at the Earth Summit, they gave them the authority then to come into the UN and to act as pressure cooker activists there to keep pushing all of the delegates who are recalcitrants that are not going along with the globalist agenda. And they agitate and lobby against or for whatever project the UN is after. But here in the United States, we have thousands of NGOs, activist, globalist, pro-homosexual, pro-abortion, pro-migration, pro-Green New Deal, environment radicals, feminists, transgender, all of these groups. They are funded by our tax dollars through all of these different cabinets and agencies, the Department of Education, Labor, State, Defense. They give billions of dollars in grants every year to all of these different radical groups. So we're funding all of these things that they make appear like this big rally that they had in Los Angeles, where all of these migrant activists took over the 101 freeway there, which runs right down through the middle of LA, and they just swamped the area, and so millions of people get to work or trying to go various places, or even emergency vehicles can't get through. They're being funded. All of these different migrant groups are being funded with our tax dollars through the UN and through agencies here in the United States. So that has to be rooted out, and then they need to go after what I'm sure you've covered on your program from time to time, the tax-exempt foundations. In the 1950s, we had the Reese Committee of Congress that started looking into the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie, all of those big foundations that were funding subversive and communist organizations. All of the media came down on them. We didn't have all the alternative media that we have now. And those investigations were squashed.
And they actually found out in the Reese Committee that one of the guys involved in it was here from Tennessee, the congressman. They wrote that they were shocked to find out that American foundations were funding pro-communist, or what they would call pro-collectivist ideologies into our schools. You know, not
Absolutely.
Individualism, but this was going on in the 30s and 40s, all the way up to the 30s and 40s, all the way through. So that, you know, no wonder we have guys in the Korean War who couldn't, in the 1950s, couldn't defend American values, and that's how they were able to be taken over by the Chinese communist propaganda in the POW camps of the Korean War that I've, done my documentary Brainwashed America Part 1 and 2 on. And you're thinking, wait a minute, how did guys in the 1950s not know more about America's educational system, our department, our Constitution, and what they were there for? And because by the 30s and 40s, these foundations were already rewriting the education that was training those guys who in the 1950s ended up in the Korean War, ended up as POWs and couldn't fight off the propaganda of the Chinese communists in those camps. That's got to be shocking to most Americans because they think 1940s, 1950s, our kids are learning really, really good education. No, the foundations already penetrated them and started teaching them collectivism. Closing comment?
So, yes, so this goes back a couple of generations. And so what we're dealing with now is that multi-generational effect that corrosive effect that all of this subversive propaganda by the tax-exempt foundations has been continuing. And so we have that today. In fact, it has expanded exponentially because with all of the new billionaires, before it was primarily the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, Carnegie. Those were the big ones. MacArthur Foundation. But now we have the Gates Foundation. We have Soros, of course, the Open Society Foundations, and Pierre Amador and Bloomberg and so many others who are these billionaire globalists, the kind who always run off to Davos, to the World Economic Forum, and who will then go off to Beijing and are buddy-buddy with the communists in Beijing, and that includes Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio and others of that ilk. And then they pour money into all of this propaganda. And so what the one valid thing that the IRS should be doing, and which we can still get rid of it, and other agencies under the Treasury or under the FBI can, the Kash Patel FBI, if we get him or someone like him in there, should go after these foundations, which are illegally pouring money into political activism, and they've gotten away with it. They've
as 501c3s, as nonprofits, funding, which is, again, how you got Zucker giving money to all these civic and tech groups for, like, how can a nonprofit be involved in doing this, going to mostly Democrats? JBS.org, senior editor for the New American, Bill Jasper. Bill, as always, great to have you on our broadcast. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Keep up your good work.
You too, my friend. Check it out. All he does over there, jbs.org with the New American. All right, what a great program tonight, folks. Now, before we conclude, take a look at this. Worldviewreport.com, folks. This is your daily aggregated news site. I put up these myself every day from early in the morning until I go to bed at night. I'm putting up articles here. Actually, folks, I use a lot of this for my own show prep. I'm like, hey, I need to talk about it on the air, and I go and I post it there. But many of these stories, I'm sorry, I don't have time to get to them all. Even though I'm on TV all the time, I don't have time to get to all these because there's so much happening so fast. So tell your family and friends about this site, worldviewreport.com. It's brought to you by you. So again, thank you for supporting groups like Worldview Talk, Worldview Talk, getting your free satellite phone with a very reasonable monthly plan, your solar generator and all that. Your partnership with us makes these free resources like this possible, one of them being worldviewreport.com. Hey, tell your family and friends about worldviewtube.com/APPS, worldviewtube.com/APPS. Find out about all of our distribution platforms, our free Roku channel, our free iOS app, Android app, Google TV, Amazon Fire, all of it. Worldviewtube.com/APPS. Check out all of this. Again, brought to you by you through our foundation. Don't forget about joining our vault and get access to 35 years of all my research. My book from 1990, New Age is Not So New, supposed to be up there this week. My one from 93 is up there, 95, 2005. Like all of my books are up there as ebook, except for that one from 1990. Radio shows, TV shows, conference DVDs, and more. And when you join, you'll be able to live stream special events. We have a big special event coming up Saturday night, February 22nd, in studio. JJ Carrell, Todd Bensman, and Colonel Rob Maness live in the building. But only for Vault members is our way of saying thank you, because this is one way you can support us. Worldviewtube.com/vault. I cannot announce it yet, but very soon I will be announcing another big event coming up in April. And you'll have to be a Vault member to live stream this big event coming up, and some other special things coming up in May, but I can only tell you about those things very, very soon, though. Can't tell you tonight, but you got to be a member. Worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault. Okay. Now, as we go, don't forget, one of the great ways you can support us is by becoming a regular contributor at worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there. Please, this is, again, Bella Grace and the foundation, two of the biggest sponsors because of you. So this is so important. We got to keep this foundation growing. Like my wife said the other night, she said, how is it these groups bring in millions of dollars and they're not doing anywhere near what you guys are doing at Worldview Tube? I'm like, I don't understand it either. I see these groups, I check out their financial records. They're bringing in millions of dollars. They ain't doing squat. I guess some people don't really care if they get anything back for their money as far as what they support. Sad. But I see some of these networks that don't broadcast anywhere near truth, and they raise millions a year. I mean, these are really not very professional networks, not at all. Some of them here out of the Mid-South, they're just, these guys, I'm sorry, they're just silly rednecks. Silly rednecks. They're not telling you anything of any virtual importance. They bring in a ton of money. I don't know who gives to these people, but apparently they do, because I look at their financials, they're raising millions. We're on the air with cutting edge, highly researched, 35 years of foundation under us, and we're not bringing in what they are. I don't know. I guess part of it is the simpler you keep it, the more people you appeal to, right? Keep it an inch deep and a mile wide, Brandon. You'll have a lot of donors throwing you money because you'll attract a bigger audience. Well, that's true. Keep it an inch deep and a mile wide, and that's right. You will have a bigger audience, and I guess if you have a bigger audience, you have bigger donors. Well, guess what? I'm not going to sit here and keep it an inch deep and a mile wide. I would be bored out of my mind, and I would be rejecting my mission and my calling. So yeah, by nature, the fact that we're kind of an organization based on, deep content, serious content, we actually take a stand on things like Israel and whatnot. I guess that means our audience is smaller, right, Dolly? But we're going to take a smaller audience and stand for truth. So there you go. Please, she's watching herself on TV again. You are. That's you. WorldviewFoundation.com. You always like to come up here about the right time every night and say goodbye, don't you? WorldviewFoundation.com. WorldviewFoundation.com. Roll the music. Let's call it a night. Dolly's ready to get out of the studio. Like, Dad, we've been in here all day long. All right, so let's go. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, thank you for telling your family and friends about the broadcast at worldviewtube.com. Are you ready to go outside? You want to go outside and play ball? Where's your ball? You know where your ball is? You go outside and play ball? Let's do that. Let's go outside. Throw the tennis ball a little bit. You want to do that? Let's go do that. We'll be right back tomorrow, folks. Oh, what a big program we're going to have tomorrow with Neil. Well, we will with Neil, but with Aaron Lavarco out of Israel, with all this breaking news, we're going to have a lot going on. So again, tune in tomorrow as we kick it off. But don't forget about all the other great shows we produce here for you. But again, it's all brought to you by you. So thank you for your support. Thank you for your kind words, your letters, your emails, your texts. You guys are so supportive and encouraging. Thank you so much. Till next time, I'm Brannon Howse. May God save America. Take care.